I think you should have a button on your show because whenever anybody spouts, myself included, you should be able to press a button that goes bang.
Money FM 89.3, it's time for Sports Minutes with me, Zia-ul Raushan. A club in transition, a chairman steps aside and now a head coach departs. After nearly 8 years at the helm, Desmond Ong bid farewell to BG Tampines Rovers on the 1st of June. And soon after, it's been confirmed that head coach Gavin Lee will also be departing the club. So having helped to steady the ship through stormy clouds and seemingly leaving them in a better place than when he first arrived in 2017, clouds of doubt have once again emerged surrounding the uncertainty that the future holds for BG Tampines Rovers after wholesale changes to the leadership team. And on this episode of Sports Minutes, we sit down with Desmond himself to unpack it all, his journey, motivations, the road ahead, and the price of keeping his football dream alive. Desmond, welcome to Sports Minutes. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Raushan. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm not sure why you haven't been bored of my voice by now, but you know.
It's nice of you to host us in your very nice office, which takes part of your time as your day job. But we're not here to talk about your day job. We're talking about your passion, and that's football. We have to start, though, with the latest news. That is Gavin Lee leaving BG Tampines Rovers not so long after you announced your departure. Dare I ask why now? And I do wonder who broke the news to who first.
Well, I think I've said enough on socials why I felt the time was right for me to leave. And some of what I say applies to Gavin as well. We've always been a club about succession planning. And from Gav's point of view, this was something that he had been thinking about for a while as well. I don't think his love or passion for the club has diminished in any way. But 8 years is a very long time, in my case, to spend at the club. In Gavin's case, he's been at the club 7 years, 1 year as an assistant coach and 6 years at the helm. So I sort of understand his desire, his motivation for a new challenge. But I think more importantly than that is, at this point in time, I would venture he really needs a break. If you've been fortunate enough or if you are privy to the way he works, this is a man who's wedded to his job, right? His players will tell you, post a game, he's up till 4 or 5 a.m. clipping videos. He's truly your 24/7 worker. So I fear for his mental health. So if he can have this period where he just takes a step back, I could not be happier.
Right before the Singapore Cup final, you put out that now cryptic post in terms of last dance, I believe you said, or something along those lines. And I posed that question to Gavin post-match, right? In terms of trying to pry for who's leaving. Here we are. And it seems like all of you are leaving. Did you already know? Were the ducks already aligned?
At that point, I would say Gav had intimated, but being the professional he was, he said, boss will speak after the final. So I knew he was thinking those thoughts. We also knew that some of our players, for example, had already received offers. People like Kyoga, Seiya, had already received offers and had come to us. And in that sense, the last dance moniker, cheesy as it was, seemed apt in terms of what was going on in the background.
Absolutely. I'm torn between titling this episode Last Dance or Clean Slate. I might go for Clean Slate. In terms of that clean slate, I have to ask, Straits Times of course alluded to Akbar Nawaz coming in as the replacement for Gavin. Not here to talk about Akbar. I want to ask about Farah in terms of part of the backroom staff as well. Is he staying on or is he as well leaving?
The Farah question is open. Open in the sense that Farah wants to do his pro license. So the current thinking prior to all this talk of people leaving was that he might take a year off to do his pro license in Serbia, right? If not for that case, then he would have been the logical person to step up to fill Gavin's shoes. But as you know, our league now mandates that the head coach needs to have a pro license. And on that note, Noor Rahman's doing his pro license as well. So much as I respect Akbar, I don't think Farah, beg your pardon, Akbar is a long-term solution for us. And Akbar and us, we have great relationship. You will recall he grandfathered Gavin as well for a bit during the ACL days, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sorry Akbar, grandfather is not a term I would use on a 50-year-old, but we'll take that. Coming back to Gavin, you talk about grandfather, let's talk about the grandson then. Gavin, you appointed when he was just 28 years old, which is very much against the grain because, yes, there are some jobs that need youth and vigor, but some jobs, historically at least, need experience and know-how. Why did you go against the grain and sort of put your neck out for someone like Gavin?
I would not say I put my neck out, right? That's slightly disrespectful to Gavin. As he himself would say, if you're good enough, you're old enough. I had known Gavin since he was 16.
Wow.
So this was not something that chanced upon me and I thought, well, now I'm chairman of a club, let's do whatever I want. I had a long, serious think about where the club was going. And if you recall, in my first year as chairman, Jürgen Rapp was my coach, right? And Jürgen is very much old school in terms of how he coaches the players. And by then, because of my friendship with Gavin, my friendship with some of the other coaches then, people like Clement and so on and so forth, and even Felipe, I thought that this cannot be the future. And so it then became a case of thinking through what sort of coach we would want moving forward. Being a club that, as it were constrained by budgets, constrained by where we were playing. One of the early names that came to mind was someone like Alex Weaver, who achieved success with the Warriors. But I think by then, Alex was more or less out the door in terms of having gone to pastures new. So then the thought occurred to me, why not look at someone like Gavin? And again, it wasn't an overnight decision because I think the first thing we did was to make Gavin assistant to Jürgen. So I had a chance to sort of observe him at close quarters. So when you say what made you, sort of stick your neck out, by the time we appointed Gavin, we already knew that he was up to the job.
I can understand in terms of giving him a chance to prove himself and earn his stripes before putting him in the hot seat. Here we are after his departure. How do you think he fared in terms of repaying that trust?
I think fantastic. I could not have asked for a better return, as it were. I sound like a fanboy because I am a fanboy. But as they say, the line between genius and insanity is a fine one, right? If I'd appointed a 28-year-old and we'd finished consistently bottom of the league, we'd be having a totally different conversation now. Of course, you will always have the haters, as it were, on socials. Like they say, the difference between intelligence and stupidity is that intelligence is limited. That's all I'll say about that. I mean, what has he achieved? He has consistently finished, if you go for average position, he's finished 2.5. We have never finished below Balestier, Hougang. 1 year we finished below Hougang, but we never finished below Balestier, Geylang, Tanjong Pagar, Young Lions, and possibly another club that escapes me. If not for the emergence of LCS, for instance, we would have won the league 3 times. That's who we finished second to, right? If not for LCS, we would have won the cup another time. The only one that still stings a bit is when Krychek came and did his miracle, because that one we were favourite to win the cups. So I could well be sitting here and saying, in his tenure, we've won 3 cups and 3 leagues, right? But it is football. It is what it is. You accept it for what's gone on. In our time, we played because of COVID and so on. We played in the cup 4 times. He's reached the final 3 times. 1 time we lost in the semis to LCS, right? Like I said, I've got a whole collection of silver medals. We finished second in the league 4 times, right? Swords law, you can't legislate for that, right? So if you want to go down into points per game and all that, yeah, he's got a record that stands up against anybody. He averages close to 60% win rate, right? If you look at where we finished this season, right, we were 8 points behind Sailors. If you conservatively take their budget to be a certain number and ours, which is publicized, we gather points at $35,000 per point.
Wow.
Sailors does it at $250,000 per point. We are clearly best of the rest, and best of the rest by far. Now, is that because you've got a brilliant chairman? No, right? Do we sign all national team players? Clearly not, right? I've spoken about this. So it's got to be down to the coach and the coaching staff. So when you ask me now, my long answer to your very short question, it's obviously paid off for us.
Absolutely. We'll dive into that national team player conversation in a very short while. I want to ask you this about Gavin in terms of the road ahead, right? You're a man in the know. I'm sure you're high up Gavin's frequently contacted list. What next then for Gavin Lee?
I think for now he's taking a well-deserved break. He's taking a break with his wife and their family home in Thailand. And I stress well-deserved. As you know, he didn't immediately go off with the players off-season. He had national team duties. I remain very interested both personally and professionally in the next step of his career. We've had many thoughts and many plans. But there are certain things I'm not at liberty to sort of share at this point in time. I don't like playing secret squirrel. I'm quite transparent. But all I'll say is that please be patient. Hopefully all will be revealed in the next 2 weeks or so.
Let's move it on to Desmond, the chairman. 8 years you were chairman of BG
Yeah.
Tampines Rovers. To start with, if you had to choose a movie title to describe your tenure as chairman, what would it be?
Dumb and Dumber.
Dare I ask?
No. I'm kidding. I mean, some days it felt like Mission Impossible. But if you give me time to reflect, then at the risk of sounding a bit cheesy, probably The Pursuit of Happiness. A lot of things we did, we told ourselves, when I say we, it was myself, my management, my coaching team, we told ourselves very early on that we were going to do it in a clean sheet kind of way. We were not going to be constrained by what people felt we should do. Not to say we're going to be mavericks for the sake of it, but let's really think about the sort of club, the sort of ethos, what was good previously about the club. It wasn't a case of, because we're new, let's change everything. We weren't going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. Club had a long history, tradition. They had fantastic players. They have a culture of winning, a culture of excellence. Somehow along the way, that sort of went out the window. The club used to connect with its fans, some of these fans were fanatical. We still got a few older uncles dotted around who will come up to me and sometimes scold me and say, what are you all doing, and then we take time, we get to know, and we sort of understood. We feel we understood what the club was about. So it was a case of, let's try and build a club that looks like this, that feels like this. And I would like to think, immodestly, that we have succeeded to a certain extent.
I love the fact that you chose that movie, Pursuit of Happiness, and you speak about it with a gleam in your eye at the end of 8 years. I think it speaks volumes of what you've built.
It's very kind of you, thank you.
But the honest truth is, when you took over in 2017, the club was in debt. 3 million was reported. I'm guessing it wasn't that clean, the sheets basically, right? What convinced you then to still embark on this? I mean, Pursuit of Happiness aside, bank balance is a big part to think about.
Yeah, so to be perfectly honest, it took a long time on my part because I tend to make decisions almost like that most days. By long, it actually took weeks, possibly months to think through, like what were the possible downside. People say you can make money from football. I've not seen that. If you ask Forrest, how do you become a millionaire from football? He'll say, start by being a billionaire, right? So it was long and hard thinking on my part. A couple of reasons helped. One, the fact there was subvention from the government. Two, this is a league which, although controversial, weighed in favor of doing it, that where there's no relegation. So you're guaranteed a certain sum of money that comes in from the government, right? Three, the people who are overseeing the process then were very helpful. Edwin Tong, MP, as he then was, Mr. Tavanesan, they were very prepared to sort of say, okay, these are the things that ail the club then. We'll get PwC, I think, to come and audit it, put it in a box. And in terms of these monies or these debts, they should not trouble you. But effectively, you've got to find your own funding moving forward, as well as find a way to slowly repay some of these debts. So I think the fact that a number of people came together and said, look, we do want you to do it, and in a way sort of help us. And some of the club chairmen then were also very helpful, for which I remain grateful to today. Ben Teng, Bill Ng, and even Korinaga. They were very helpful in terms of, let's do this together, and if you need any help, reach out. So there was that whole gotong royong spirit that I quite subscribed to, and I thought, okay, what's the worst that could happen? I just be bankrupt now.
Thankfully, it did not go down that road. Here we are, and you're very kind to talk about the various institutions that came along with financial aid or the chairmen that stepped in to help you. I think that speaks of your humility, right? But I have to ask you this: you didn't just receive the funding and stay afloat. You tried to push. You tried to go above and beyond the basics, which, without mentioning names, some clubs do in the league, right? Was that the Desmond touch?
No, I wouldn't take credit for that. So like I tell my friends anecdotally, I used to have a wide group of friends. Then that group has shrunk over the years because I do have quite a thick skin. So I would approach my business contacts, my friends, and say, look, we're running a club. We need help. We want to do this and we want to do that. would you see fit to write us a check? Would you see fit to sponsor us? So apart from the first year where we put Homat across our chest because we wanted to instill respect, we've always had a shirt sponsor, for instance, and some of these people have been very generous. So like ANA Courier Express has been on our shirt for the longest time until recently when BG came into the picture. So that helped a lot in terms of what we wanted to do, at least on the financial side. In the early days, Mr. Teo from Komoko, Hokseng, former chairman, helped us as well. So you would have seen Komoko for a period or for a season on our A boards and on our shirt. So really, a lot of people put their money where their mouths were and helped us. So none of what we did subsequently would have been possible without their assistance.
Thank you for sharing that insight, Des. I think a lot of people just see points and tables. They don't realize how much work actually goes into all of this, right? You talk about making calls to old friends in terms of bringing them on. I want to ask you, what was the hardest call you had to make in 8 years as your chairman? Not an actual phone call, but you know what I mean.
A lot of calls were hard. If you ask me to name one particular one as the hardest, I probably could not tell you. But I can share with you maybe a couple that were not so easy, right? When LCS burst onto the scene, they came after Shadan and Adli. Now, I've gone on record on many occasions saying that Shadan is my favorite player still, right? Shadan is a player I would pay money to watch him play. Maybe not today. No offense. And we actually could keep Shadan because Shadan himself was almost begging me and said, boss, just try and match or come close to matching. But you know, they were paying him or offering him 2.5 times what we're paying him. I could have kept Shadan in the sense that we could have made do with 1 or 2 fewer players in the squad, but I would have kept Shadan. And symbolically, he was our captain. But the call was made that, look, if we pay him that amount, what does that say about what we're trying to achieve as a squad? But because he was my favorite player in that sense. I know chairman's not supposed to have favorites, but he was very instrumental to the way we were playing. He was helping bring people along like Shah, and this was pre-Kyoga days, if you recall. And he was dovetailing well with Yase and Joel and all that. And then just to have the heart wrenched out of your team then. So that was quite a tough call when we eventually said, no, go with our blessings.
Wow, that's good to know in terms of how hard you tried to keep Shadan, and unfortunately sailors came calling. My next question is about the sailors though. Earlier you mentioned the stats in terms of points per dollar spent, so on and so forth, right? But when you're a lawyer, when you look at the stats, maybe 10 years down the road, plenty of second place finishes, plenty of silver medals, like you alluded to, and a lot of that is down to the sailors. And I will say it, you don't have to say it, the unfair playing field, right? Does that irk at you?
It used to, but you know, I cannot sit here as a capitalist and then say, well, you know, we need to have wage restriction. I mean, it is what it is. It's a fact of life, right? If I was in their position, I'd probably have done the same. Because look at what they have done. Of course, in the early days, they were a disruptor. You know, we had the best laid plans and then they came along and wrecked it. But since then, look at the standard of football that they have played. As a result of where they are, we've lifted our game to try and keep up with them. When they played Sharjah recently, the whole country came together. If you are a football fan starting out now, you could do a lot worse than trot along to a Sailors game. Their match day experience is something that other clubs should emulate, right? And now that Forrest has taken it upon himself to come in to the FAS, I've had the chance to observe the whole Sailors machinery as it was. And I think what really impresses me is this focus on just football, and the football. And I think it is, again, an inescapable fact that if you want to do stuff in football now, you do need resources, right? And they do bring in them a whole bunch of resources. But yes, in the early days, it did irk me, less so. Their fans still get irked by the earlier remarks I said, right? It doesn't help that my fans now call them plastics, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Just throwing in some shade there, I'll take it. And I guess now that you work for Forrest, technically you have to
I don't
be
work
kinder.
for Forrest, I work with Forrest.
Okay, I have to ask you this about Forrest though, because he's so elusive, right? Just a very quick question deviating from what we are talking about. Forrest obviously is the new FAS president. You are deputy president, so you know the man much better than me, much better than the listeners. Is there a lot of reason to be optimistic that Forrest is the man to push us in the right direction?
I wouldn't put that amount of pressure on Forrest. I would say that having met him, I found him to be very sincere. I found him, for a man of his standing, to be very humble. He is constantly curious, like I am. We share this curiosity about how to do things better, how to do things differently. I've been very impressed with his focus in terms of wanting to get things done. So I think in some small way, I've helped him. We've assembled a team of people that we think can progress Singapore football. I would just add a note of caution that from Forest transforming home to LCS, it's taken close to 5 years to get to where they are now. Similarly, I've told you earlier that when I took over in 2017, it was not till about 2023 that I could stare you in the eye proudly and say, this is a club that I'm quite proud of.
Let's continue the conversation about BG Tampines Rovers, and I'm going to try and get under your skin a bit, okay?
Sure.
Because we're going to talk national team players. That's his label that BG Tampines Rovers, under your stewardship, signed national team players. You guys were a rich club, and therefore it was Sailors, BG Tampines Rovers, and then the rest. What do you say to that?
I think you should have a button on your show, because whenever anybody spouts, myself included, you should be able to press a button that goes "Bah." I think recently you allowed people on your show to say things like that. I mean, for crying out loud, right? But you know, it's prevalent in football. Whenever people lose or they don't do well, it's always somebody else's fault, right? The examples are too many to mention, yeah. But one of the common tropes, as it were that Tampines is a rich club. I'm not sure. Maybe it stems from the days when Mr. Teo was in charge, and he made a lot of high-profile signings. It may have also been my predecessor signing Jermaine Pennant. I can assure you we have the same amount of money that every other club that gets subvention from the government does. Occasionally, like I told you, we get lucky, we find a shirt sponsor. But this is, I gather, no better or no worse than Geylang having a shirt sponsor or Albrechts having sponsors, right? So, and don't forget, on top of that, we have a debt overhang that we have to service. So whenever anybody says that, oh, they're a rich club, it irritates me. Maybe they do it to irritate me, so power to them. Because that's certainly not true, right? Anybody who knows the books will know it's not true.
When you talk about those national team players, right, perhaps it'll be important for you to mention, yes, you mentioned Taufik Subarno, Faris Ramli coming off the bench, but in terms of the pipeline that BG Tampines Rovers has provided for the national team, how much pride do you take that players who you saw as boys are now men wearing the flag?
A lot. Indescribable. I almost feel like a father. I felt proud when my son, who was part of the NFA, donned national colours, albeit not at the senior level. It's the same feeling. I always wish I could go back in time and show you, you know, they came to training, they were quiet, they looked like they've been, I don't know, scolded, they were meek. And now look at them, right? Art Lee, Joel Chew, Glenn Quay, Shazwan Buhari. Shaz has suffered from the fact that he's played behind two really good keepers that he's not been able to get past, Izwan and Hassan, right? Taufik. All of this have become national players on our watch, right? So for someone to go and say, oh, they signed national, come on, that's disingenuous. That's not fair. That's doing a disservice to the boys themselves, and that's doing a disservice to the coaching team that's developed these boys. So maybe this can put an end once and for all to this rubbish about Tampines being a rich club or Tampines signing national players. And you really should consider that button I spoke about.
I was going to say, I might get some numbers for sponsor contact in terms of the button we need. In terms of perceptions and debunking perceptions, people say, oh, chairman of a football club must be quite cool position. But in fact, it's a voluntary position and you dovetail it, you double hat together with your day job as a partner in a law firm as well. How difficult is that?
It's difficult in the sense that I'm quite a hands-on person. So when I first took the job, right, I sort of spread myself really thinly. I would turn up for under 15 games, under 17 games, so on and so forth. But I think I've learned to let some of that go. I can't do everything all at once. So naturally at the senior games, the SPL games, I'm there. At the under 21 games, I'm there. I'm at training about 3 times a week, right? Not because I need to supervise, because I'm just want to be there. This season, I started attending the WPL games, the women's games. So a lot of it is, in that sense, self-inflicted. There are some chairmen who I never see at games, and that's fine. That's their style. They get reports from their coaches, they may watch on telly, they may have much more exacting schedules than I do. So no judgment there, right? So you ask me, it's something I bring upon myself. Luckily, I have a wife that's understanding. She attends most SPL games with me. She draws a line at going for training because she's much smarter than I am. But yeah, it does take up a fair bit of my time.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think it's important that people understand how much you're giving. We talked about clearing the debt of the club. You've obviously invested a whole lot of time and heart into the institution as well. I want to ask you this in terms of your departure, right? Since you announced it, we had lunch a couple of days after, and you were candidly telling me, "Oh, so paiseh, man. So many people are tagging me in posts and talking about my legacy." Cringe aside, how did that make you feel?
I'm very touched. Very touched. I don't think I set out to do things to earn kudos or plaudits. And I did not think that some of the things I did actually made people feel a certain way. I could sit there and say, oh my God, I must have been the best. No, I'm not. I was just put in a position where I was fortunate enough to be steward of a club at a time when maybe for the fan, it was like, oh my God, my club could fold, and then came in, and then the things that we did, the things that we said, sort of resonated with a part of them, and they were very happy. I think things that I'm proud of are, okay, like you say, cringe aside, right? They sing my name at games, right? I mean, what's that all about, right? They invite me, the fans invite me on a bigger level or more formal level. They invite me to play their games, right? Where we get trashed by other people, and that's fine. On a smaller level, I get personal invites to people's houses for Hari Raya. Recently at Hari Raya, people gave me that Tupperware full of cakes, like as if I need to put on more weight kind, right? Little things like that, and then you feel like, wow, they actually think of me as a friend, right? And that makes a difference to me. And again, I mentioned this, my dad passed, and so many of them just turned up for the wake, and sat there just to make sure that I was all right. I'm lost for words.
I didn't want to bring up the passing of your dad, but since you have, I will ask you something about that. Your dad passed quite recently, and I think all of us who subscribe to you on social media would have seen your emotions shared, right? What do you think he makes of your legacy in terms of where he left you earlier this year?
I don't think it's a legacy. I think that's being cheeky. I think in his own way he was proud. I think my dad is a typical Asian dad, right? A lot of us identify. If he doesn't scold you, it's a good day. You will never be good enough. One of the regrets I have, and I don't mind sharing, I never ever told my dad I love you. The way you see them do but I think he knows that. And I know in his own way he loves me as well. And I think that's enough.
No, I agree with you, and I'm quite touched because I've lost my father as well many years ago.
I'm so
but
sorry.
To your point, in an Asian household, we fail to explicitly inform our emotions, and then in hindsight, we wish we had that opportunity again, right? Anyway, back to the football. You talked about the fans making you one of their own almost with chants, with invites. Now that you've left, what do you think the players are saying about you?
I hope they've moved on. I mean, I would hate for them to say, oh, because I did have a chance to address the players, and a lot of them are also more than just players to me. We have a relationship outside of playing field, and it was explained clearly to them. In fact, the players were fantastic. Most of them were told about 3 weeks before I left. So whatever they would have wanted to say would have been said, right? And they know who Shongo is. He's not a stranger, right? So they can say whatever they want. I'm fairly chill about that. Yeah.
And you bring up your successor. There are plenty of listeners who are of the black and yellow variety, right? They are gripped with anxiety, I guess, because a chairman they doted on has left. a coach they trusted has now left. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the way ahead for BG Tampines Rovers. What's your message to the fans?
Rubbish. Uncertainty is a narrative you're trying to push. Shungo has played with us. When I say play, we used to have chairman selection games. So he's not unknown to the Yellow Knights, right? Shungo is a different creature from me. Shungo is a bit more reserved, but he has that quiet inner steel and resilience that will serve him well in this job. He's already shown it. He's made some signings, some from left field that I've not thought about. And I'm very, very happy. And I think the Yellow Knights is an embodiment of our fan who are much more connected to the club than the rest of. They all actually know this. There's no uncertainty, as it were, right? So don't be cheeky about it. That's a narrative you're trying to peddle. I think in terms of Gavin, yes, I think the slight twist to that is we always knew Farah was coming through, Nor was coming through. We may have to sort of, progress is never linear. We may have sort of to take a slight, instead of going up, go sideways for a bit, have Akbar come in, steady the ship. Like I said, he's a pair of hands that's well known to us, before we push on upwards again. In fact, I'm very excited. I'm very interested to see how the team shapes up. I am privy to sort of some of the signings that have been made, some of the signings that will be made. And I can tell you, as a fan, I'm excited. And if any of my fans are, any of the club's fans are listening, you should be excited as well.
We talked a lot about what you've enjoyed doing, what you will take with you. I want to ask you this, what will you not enjoy doing at all in terms of being a chairman?
I may have alluded to this in the past. The conversations you have with players, for example, when they've come to the end of their careers, for instance, that's not a conversation I like having. Follow closely by we don't think you're going to make it at our club. Having said that, a lot of players that we have let go in recent times, we try to speak to other clubs. And then we sort of soften the blow by saying, so-and-so would like to speak to you if you are interested. I think in the 8 years, I've only ever had to let 2 players go.
I think the listeners are already trolling through the archives to see who those 2 players are. If they know almost, right? Again, trying to be cheeky here.
Don't stare.
Final few questions. We're talking about the end of your tenure as chairmanship, but you remain vice chairman, I believe, right? Is that just on paper, or are you still going to be involved in the day-to-day in terms of providing Shungo counsel?
That's probably more on paper than anything. I still sit on the management committee. I would still make sure that the legal compliance and governance issues are dealt with, because that's my bread and butter. And it's very important that the governance issues are dealt with properly, particularly as you're a society, you're taking money from Sport SG. So there has to be a certain degree of responsibility there. And that's something I've told my fellow MC members I will always look after for them. 2, the one thing that that reposes in me that I would really like to pass out is this relationship with BG. As you can imagine, there's a lot of personal relationships involved with that. So one of the things we will do is we have a pre-season arrangement with BG. So when Shungo goes up with the team this time, I'm hoping to introduce him to various people there. We've had some introductions when BG came through, when they came to town. But I think we've not seen the whole sort of people that he needs to meet, and Akbar as well, to meet them and get to make those relationships their own. On my part, it's a bit artificial. I'll probably stay away for a while from Tampines games, much as I'm a fan. I think new management, new coach needs time to breathe, to get into it. It's not going to help anybody if people spot me or Gav in the crowd and start chanting on. That's not helpful.
Thank you for sharing that context, and I think I agree with you in terms of just stepping aside, being that bridge for the new management, right? I want to ask you this, and I forgot to ask you this earlier, so I'm going to come back to it. There was this brilliant photo that the Straits Times ran with the announcement of your departure, you hugging Gavin, right?
Yeah.
Now that all's out in the open, can you share what was actually discussed during that photo?
So there's this joke going around, right? We have this meme that we created ourselves. So Gavin talking to me, boss, why are you laughing? Then me, Gav, I managed to con Shungo to take over.
And did he respond by saying, I managed to con Akbar to take over or something?
No, but that's our joke. It was a very emotional moment for me. Of course, we had wanted to end it on a high, but like Gav alludes to, life is not a fairy tale. And to me, it marked the end of a journey. Um, there have been all these emotions welling up inside of me. It was cup final. Mum came down. I wish dad had been there. So there were all these emotions, and then at the final whistle, I just let it all out.
Yeah, we started this conversation that we were going to discuss the price you pay for the pursuit of something you love so much. And I think that quite sums it up. Let's look ahead with the final question. You've been keen to draw a line between your new role. What has your chairmanship taught you for your role as deputy president?
Patience and more patience, and a huge dollop of humility. You always, when I first came in, I thought, oh, how hard can it be, right? It's a damn football club. How hard can it be? Sign players, get the right coach, boom. Humbling experiences. We went to ACL and got smashed, right? I would say it's come full circle this season. We have beaten two Thai, two Bangkok clubs. But it's taken a long time. So much as we have all these plans, much as Forrest and I and the rest of Exco say, we should do this, we want to do that, we realize it's going to take a fair bit of time. So patience and humility. The humility to put out hands and say, well, we may have gotten that wrong. Maybe we should consult this person or talk to that person. So patience and humility.
Thank you for saying that, because I'm going to say this. I don't think humility is a word I associate with the previous Exco. So it's good to know the FAS now has someone peddling humility as one of its ethos. Desmond, it's been absolutely brilliant catching up with you. We started this conversation celebrating your legacy as well as Gavin's departure. I leave enlightened knowing that Singapore football is in good hands. Pound for pound, you've been a breath of fresh air, and I hope you continue to fight the good fight.
Thank you very much, Raushan. Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Money FM 89.3.